Hi, this is Lauren Ray, and this is my fourth journal response podcast. But for this podcast, I decided to have a graphic with it so that it would be easier for you to follow along. And this graphic by itself is kind of difficult to understand because papers are small. But I'm going to try this and just to be different. And so let's get into our first reason. And one of the biggest things I took away from this reading is that teachers should inform students of everyone who impacted our world, of everyone. And I think this is important because unrecognized people still made an impact. People that we don't necessarily um, notice or recognize as much still made an impact on our world. And after I was looking at that biology website, it was clear to me that there was a lot of people on there that made incredible leaps and bounds in our world that I wasn't really familiar with. And really, America wouldn't be the same. This is important to study because America wouldn't be the same without these people. And not all of these people are Americans. So, not all of these people are American people. And we also learn through their process and how they kind of even not just necessarily through what they did, but how they did it. And without looking at their process of these great inventors and creative people, it would be really difficult to know this. And as far as personal experience, I had some exposure to this. As a child, I enjoyed researching both sides of conflicts and looking at reading books about the Civil War from the point of a slave and of a free man, or even the Revolutionary War from the side of a British man and an American man. And that is something that I just kind of read up on just because I was interested. I also loved world religions, and I know this is a little different than direct social studies instruction, but through studying world religions, it was really easy to see the way that people grew up kind of impacted their religion, and also looking at all the people that not just founded these religions, but were important in these cultures that still made an impact. And even just with movies coming out, Hidden Figures, which is a movie that I feel like a lot of people know about the three women who helped send the first American into orbit, and also the movie Loving, which kind of chronicles the first African American woman and white man who got married and just kind of the conflict that caused, and seeing that from that side. And as far as impact on my future classroom, this is something that I would like to recognize on a daily basis. During morning meeting, an idea I had is that during morning meeting, maybe on the anniversary of this person's creation, invention, incredible thing they did, kind of having a daily spotlight on one of these people and doing that every morning, kind of maybe even having recognizing that be a job, and have someone kind of share with us about that. And I realized that this is not an extreme amount of exposure, but some exposure is better than no exposure. And as far as the second thing I pulled out of here is that teachers can do more than just feeding students historical info from textbooks. I think this is important because not all students learn through reading textbooks, as well as the fact that there's so many other options. And we know that this is not how students learn because of Gardner's multiple intelligences, Kagan and cooperative learning, and even learning by doing by Dewey. These are all researchers who say that this is not the best way, and that yes, some students learn this way, but it's not the best. And also, there's so many other free options on Teachers Pay Teachers, this biography site, the Smithsonian Institute. These were just a couple examples of ways that we can get involved in this, not necessarily through just reading a textbook. And as far as a personal application of this is, my sixth grade social studies teacher was probably my favorite social studies teacher I ever had, and she let us learn through projects and self-exploration and field trips. Once we went to the Nelson Atkins Museum, and before that, we researched about Egypt, and we looked about Egypt, and we made Egyptian monuments, our own versions, and then we went on a field trip to the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art and looked at just different pieces of Egyptian art, and we did the same for Greece and Rome and all these different areas. And I think it was important that she let us learn not just through reading the textbook, which we did, and the textbook helped us in our learning, but it wasn't the only way we were learning. And as far as an impact on my future classroom, I would love to integrate virtual tours online of different areas and even just videos from different people groups. I would love to integrate children's literature, having a field trip, or even just bringing in a professional on a certain people group or a certain area. When we were in sixth grade, we had a man from Egypt that attended my teacher's church, and so he came in and talked all about Egypt and growing up there. Also, when we were at Google Fiberspace for Actually Computer, they showed us how you can take tours of museums online and look at different pieces of art as if you're in the museum, but just online, so I'd love to utilize that too. And the third thing that I thought was really important is that memory and history are different things. And to kind of elaborate on that, I said memory is often owned and history is interpreted, so there is a difference. And I think this is important because we need to understand this difference to understand history, and it is often misunderstood, and differentiation between the two is important because without it we can't understand history to its fullest extent. As far as a personal application, I kind of misunderstood this concept for so long, and again, my sixth grade English teacher taught me not just how to understand what history is, which she did a great job of, but also how to apply history and apply what it actually is and what it means. And as far as impact of this onto my future classroom, I think this is something that I want to be intentional in teaching at a young age, whether it's through books or through videos or even just through explaining it myself, the difference between just having a memory of something and looking at it from a historical standpoint. And one thing that I've kind of learned at Willard Central is that they have this, with Leader in Me, they have this thing that it says, seek first to understand and then be understood. And I realize it's not the same thing, but I kind of took that and switched it to understand well and then teach. Because this is something that, while I feel like I understand it better than I did in the primary grades, it's not something that I feel like I understand extensively, and I would love to do some more research into it so that when I actually get to teach the students this concept, it's not just me teaching them the basics, it's me being able to actually help them understand. And finally, the two questions I chose for this journal response the first is this. In my opinion, field trips were some of the most beneficial ways I learned about social studies. But looking into the current public school, is it really realistic to take students on a social studies field trip in a public school, just because social studies isn't necessarily thought of highly, and it's probably field trips aren't as popular anymore either. And my second question is this: what can we as teachers do to make history come alive if we are required to utilize a textbook for the most most part of the lesson. And also, even how are we supposed to adequately teach them social studies when we it isn't typically isn't given its own block of time, or it's every other day? How do we have time to teach history if social studies, this broad topic, is given such a small amount of time? And what are the most important pieces? So I know that was kind of like four questions, but this kind of just got me thinking about different things, yeah, throughout my research. So thank you for listening to my podcasts slash watching it on the screen. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next week.